The first time Eli Carter ever touched a microphone, his hands were shaking so badly that the metal rattled softly against the stand, a nervous little sound that almost drowned in the low murmur of a restless crowd gathered inside a worn-down community hall on the edge of Bakersfield, California, a place most people drove past without noticing, but for Eli, barefoot more often than not, raised on second-hand hope and hand-me-down clothes, it felt like the doorway to a world he had only ever visited in dreams, because up until that moment, music had lived only in his head and heart, humming along with the radio he found in dumpsters, singing quietly to himself under freeway bridges where nobody laughed and nobody listened. And if you had asked anyone in that crowd what they expected from the skinny 16-year-old boy with thrift store jeans and a borrowed jacket, they would have said nothing, because the world had taught them not to expect miracles from kids like Eli. Kids whose lives began in cracked apartments and empty refrigerators. Kids whose mothers worked double shifts and still came home exhausted and ashamed that love alone couldn't pay the bills. Kids who learned early that silence was safer than speaking and that dreams were luxuries meant for other people. Yet the moment Eli leaned into that microphone, something shifted. Not loudly, not explosively, but like the slow, unmistakable turning of a key inside a lock that had been rusted shut for years. Because this wasn't just a microphone to him, it was the first time anyone had ever handed him something and said, "Go ahead, this is yours now." And that simple act of trust cracked open a lifetime of quiet longing as he remembered all the nights he sang Hotel California under the stars, memorizing every word from an old scratched CD someone had thrown away, not knowing why the song spoke to him so deeply, only that it felt like a story about being trapped and searching for a way out, about beauty and loneliness coexisting, about a place you could enter but never truly leave, which felt a lot like poverty, a lot like childhood without safety nets, a lot like loving a world that didn't always love you back. And so when the first gentle guitar notes played through the speakers, simple, clean, almost fragile, Eli closed his eyes, not out of fear, but out of respect for the moment, because he knew if he looked at the crowd, at their folded arms and skeptical faces, his courage might slip away. And when he began to sing, his voice didn't come out loud at first, it came out honest, worn and warm, shaped by long nights and unanswered prayers, a voice that carried dust and hope in equal measure, and people shifted in their seats without realizing why, because something about his tone didn't sound practiced, it sounded lived in, like a voice that had been carrying stories long before it carried a melody. And as he reached the familiar line, "Welcome to the Hotel California," the room grew quieter. Not because the song was famous, but because the way he sang it made it feel new, like a confession instead of a performance, like a boy finally letting the world hear what he had been holding inside all along. And in the back row sat Mrs. Helen Moore, a retired music teacher who volunteered at the center every Thursday, a woman who had spent her life teaching scales and breathing techniques but had learned long ago that talent didn't always arrive polished. Sometimes it arrived bruised and trembling. And as she listened, tears filled her eyes because she recognized something rare in Eli. Not perfection, but truth, the kind of truth you can't teach and can't fake, the kind that grows only in the soil of struggle and survives because it has to. And while the audience leaned forward almost unconsciously, Eli's mind drifted back to the day his mother had come home with that microphone clutched to her chest like it was made of glass, her hands raw from work, her smile tired but proud as she said, "I know it's not much, baby, but I saw it at a pawn shop and thought of you." And he remembered how she had skipped meals that week, how she pretended not to be hungry so he could eat, how she listened to him sing every night even when she was bone-tired, clapping softly like he was already on a stage somewhere bigger. And that memory surged through him as he sang the chorus, his voice swelling now, confidence blooming not from ego but from gratitude, from the realization that he wasn't standing there alone, that every note carried his mother's sacrifices, the kindness of strangers who had let him sing for spare change outside diners, the old man who once gave him a sandwich and said, "You've got a gift, kid, don't bury it." And suddenly the song wasn't about a hotel at all. It was about survival, about finding beauty in confinement, about dreaming of freedom even when the doors seemed locked. And the unexpected happened as he reached the guitar solo. Someone in the crowd began to cry, then someone else, and then applause broke out not at the end, but in the middle, a spontaneous outpouring of recognition, and Eli almost faltered, startled by the sound, but he kept going, grounding himself in the rhythm, letting the music carry him forward like it always had. And when he sang the final lines, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave," his voice softened, not in despair, but in understanding, as if he had finally made peace with where he came from without letting it define where he was going. And when the last note faded, there was silence again, thick and heavy, the kind of silence that means something important just happened, and then the room erupted, not with polite claps, but with standing applause, people cheering and wiping their eyes, and Eli stood there stunned, his chest tight, his hands still shaking, not because he thought he had made it, but because for the first time in his life, he felt seen. And Mrs. Moore made her way to the stage, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder as she whispered, "You belong here," words so simple yet so powerful they nearly brought him to his knees. And what followed was not a fairy tale overnight success, but something quieter and more meaningful. A scholarship application quietly submitted, a donated guitar from a local musician who said, "This one's better than mine," a recording session offered by a small studio owner who believed talent should never die unheard, and most importantly, a community that rallied around a boy they almost overlooked, reminded that kindness doesn't need to be loud to be life-changing, that generosity doesn't always come in the form of money but in belief. And as Eli walked home that night, microphone case slung over his shoulder, stars bright above him, he realized that even if the world remained complicated and unfair, even if his path was still uncertain, something inside him had changed forever, not because he sang a famous song well, but because someone gave him a chance to be heard, and in that chance, he found his voice. And maybe that's the quiet miracle we forget too often, that a single act of compassion can turn a moment into a memory into momentum, and a trembling boy into a young man who knows, deep down, that no matter where life takes him, he will never again believe he is invisible, because hope, once given a microphone, has a way of echoing far beyond the room where it first learns to sing.